Moving to Iowa? Many people do it every single year, but they're not always sure where they want to be. We're gonna cover the top biggest cities in Iowa, and that is Davenport, Cedar Rapids, and of course, Des Moines. And we're gonna compare, contrast, see what all the big differences are and all the similarities as well, so that you can make a better decision on where you want to live when you make that move to Iowa. And let's start this video out right and talk about the biggest city that we have in all of Iowa, and that is Des Moines. In case you're curious, it is pronounced Des Moines, not Des Moines, not Des Moines. It is Des Moines. So that's your first lesson. Do not make that mistake if you're moving here, because we will know exactly that you're not from the area. But if you're moving to Des Moines, what is the cost of living there? Well, Des Moines is somewhat more affordable than the national average, but it doesn't mean that it is cheap per se. In fact, Des Moines and the Des Moines metro area is one of the more expensive markets in all of Iowa. And why is that? Well, it's really one of the markets that is growing the fastest. In fact, they're going to be looking at hitting almost 1 million people in the next probably 3 years. From a contact that I know over there, she was talking about it, an agent, and she was saying, yeah, we're going to hit 1 million in the next few years. Not Des Moines proper, but Des Moines metro. So they have to build a lot of homes to accommodate all of that influx of people coming in. So places like Ankeny, you drive around Ankeny, there is new homes going up here and there and everywhere, and they aren't cheap when you're looking at it from an Iowa standard of market. So that is why the housing is a little bit more expensive, and of course the cost of living is a little more expensive, because housing is a big part of the cost of living. And now let's go on over to the east side of the Iowa area, and that is Davenport, and that is where I am located. And Davenport, as far as cost of living, is seen more as more affordable option when you're looking at Iowa, because we do have homes that have sold here for $20,000 all the way up into the $1 million homes. But on average, you're looking at about $250 as the average price point and the median price point. So it is something that is seen as more affordable, especially when you're comparing it to the national average, where the national average is in the 4s or 5s. So something to really consider, but Davenport is definitely seen as that more affordable option. And along with the cost of living in Davenport, a lot of our utilities are seen as being a lower cost, and our groceries are seen to be at a lower cost, especially when comparing to the national average. Now, Des Moines, Davenport, Cedar Rapids, a lot of those things are going to be very similar when it comes to groceries and utilities and all that, but it's not going to be exactly the same. So just something to really think about when you're trying to decide which city in Iowa is going to be right for you. But we haven't even talked about Cedar Rapids. And the real reason is Cedar Rapids is actually fairly comparable to Davenport. Des Moines is kind of an outlier when you're talking cost of living and specifically housing, because they are building so much more so quickly compared to Davenport or Cedar Rapids. That's not to say that Cedar Rapids doesn't have a lot of building going up. In fact, Marion is one of the hubs, North Liberty is one of the hubs for a lot of new construction, which is all kind of close to Cedar Rapids. But cost of living is fairly similar when you're comparing Davenport and Cedar Rapids, because they are actually fairly close in proximity to each other, about an hour drive, give or take, in between. And you can see that in relationship, where Des Moines is a whole nother hour past that. So just something to think about when it comes to cost of living, that Cedar Rapids and Davenport, you're gonna see a lot of similarities when it comes to that. Now, cost of living is nothing if you don't have a job. So what does the jobs look like in all three of these cities? Well, let's start out with Davenport. Davenport is actually, the reason I'm in Davenport at all is because of the job opportunity. When I moved here, I was a mechanical engineer. I worked for a company called Alcoa, and it was the main driver for me to come here. But what does that say about the economic stuff going on in Davenport? Well, honestly, Davenport is seen as a little bit of a diverse area when it comes to types of jobs. Yes, I was in manufacturing, but there are different jobs. Well, there's a lot of similarities in jobs. So right across the river, we have John Deere, which is a big manufacturer. Of course, Alcoa, Arconic. You have aerospace stuff going on, but we also have tech, we have insurance, we have a lot of different things. Is that the majority? No, but it's kind of all over the spectrum when you're looking at job opportunities in Davenport, and that is seen as kind of a nice perk when you're moving here, because if you're not in a manufacturing job or an engineering job, you have options that maybe some of these other areas might not have. And speaking of other areas, what about Cedar Rapids? Well, Cedar Rapids is really known a lot more for its manufacturing. It has Quaker Oats up there and a whole bunch of different facilities that are mainly focused on manufacturing, which is good and bad when you're looking at it from an economic standpoint, because it's not a ton of diversity. Not to say that they don't have any other jobs. Obviously they do, but that is a good majority, is that manufacturing hub. Very similar to Davenport, but Davenport just feels like it has a little bit more diversity when it comes to the jobs. But Des Moines, on the other hand, is a completely different story. In fact, when I was going to college in Ames, go Iowa State, right? Go Cyclones. I actually had an internship in West Des Moines, and that internship had to deal with insurance. I was an engineer, but I was working in insurance, and Des Moines is actually known as the insurance capital of the nation. And I saw that. And you know, if you've never worked in insurance, it's an interesting place. The job that I had actually had served breakfast, lunch, and dinner at different times during the week. On Mondays, it was breakfast, which I really, really enjoyed. It was catered in. And on Wednesdays, it was a catered in lunch, which I enjoyed. And then Fridays was appetizers slash dinner, supper, whatever you want to call it. It was a lot of fun. But on top of that, they also had a fully stocked kitchen at all times. So even if you wanted to just go get a snack, they had that, which is a completely different story than when I went to manufacturing, because that was not the norm. It was in the insurance world, at least that company in particular it was. So it's kind of neat to see that. But they have in Des Moines a lot of insurance companies, and also surprisingly enough, Des Moines is really known for its tech as well. They have Facebook there, I believe Microsoft is there, I even think Google is there, but I'm not 100% sure. But they have facilities, server farms, all sorts of different things when it comes to Des Moines, and you can see that in the growth of Des Moines itself, because all those jobs are there. It's diverse. It's not just agriculture. It's not just manufacturing. You have all sorts of different things going on in Des Moines that some of these other areas don't really have. So something to think about if you're moving and you want to have a good job market. Well, that's what you got to know about each city itself. And I am obviously located here in Davenport. And if you're moving to Davenport, I would love to help you out. I'm a licensed realtor here. But if you're not moving to Davenport and you're moving to one of these other cities like Des Moines or Cedar Rapids, guess what? Because of this channel, I have connections all over the state, even if it's not in Des Moines or Cedar Rapids, but I can hook you up with an amazing realtor no matter where you decide to move to in Iowa. So give me a call, send me a text. I am the one that answers all those emails, text messages, and phone calls. So hit me up if you're moving here and you need a little help. Now let's talk a little bit more about the quality of life or the style of life in each of these cities. Now obviously you're gonna get urban areas in each of these cities, but of these cities you're probably gonna get more of that urban feel when you're in the heart of the city. Now that doesn't mean that the whole city feels like an urban center, obviously not. In fact, Davenport is more known for its suburbs more than its city lifestyle, city feel, even though they do have the downtown area. And as far as Cedar Rapids goes, you don't have a huge amount of city center, at least I haven't experienced it. Now, caveat to this, Cedar Rapids is actually the only one that I haven't lived in. So keep that in mind. I've been there several times, but I haven't lived there, whereas Davenport and Des Moines, I have lived there, so take it with a grain of salt. But when you get there, they do have a downtown, but it doesn't feel like the actual biggest part of the city. So you get that different lifestyle. But when you're talking about, say, Des Moines is ranked all the time for its quality of life. It's always ranked very highly, even on a national level. So obviously they got a lot of good stuff going on, and it comes down to a lot of different factors, which we will cover. But just know that Des Moines is ranked highly, and even Davenport and Cedar Rapids hit some of those rankings sometimes. So just something to think about. The quality of life in Iowa in general, to be quite honest, is pretty good. And when you get into some of these cities, they are pretty minimal on traffic. They're pretty minimal on amount of people, which the congestion comes from that. But the thing is you still have the big city amenities and big city events and stuff to go to, no matter which city you go to. Now, if you're moving to Iowa, there's a good chance you're moving out of a big city, and maybe some of that draw is to come into more of a rural area and or outdoor area. And no matter which city you choose, you're gonna have some options. But let's talk about Cedar Rapids first. Cedar Rapids is known for a lot of green spaces. They have so many different parks. In fact, I made a video months and months ago with an agent that lives there, and he was talking about all of the parks that are there and a lot of trails and running and things that you can do. But not only that, they are close to a big lake out there that I can't think of the name, but it is actually a dammed up river that is fairly large for Iowa standards. And I've been there, and again, for the life of me, I cannot think of that name, but it is a really cool park, really cool outdoor area to get out into the outdoors, enjoy the stuff like this. The weather right now, it's absolutely beautiful, fall weather, and this is the best time to get out. But that's Cedar Rapids. What about Davenport? Davenport, one of my biggest complaints about the area is there isn't a ton of outdoor wilderness area, but that doesn't mean they don't have options. In fact, Davenport has, I think, over 26 or 27 different parks that are in the city. Vanderveer is one of my favorites. I have made several videos there. I just really like the conservatory there, which is indoor plants, jungle type plants, but then they also have just a really good background when it comes to the park itself. There's a pond there with a bunch of geese. There is the rows of trees, which are really quite beautiful no matter what time of year you were there. And then obviously the fountain, which I really enjoy sitting around. In fact, I took some pictures of it the other day with my wife, and it was a lot of fun. But for wilderness areas, it's a little bit lacking, not completely devoid. We have Scott County Park, and if you go down the river a little bit, you have Wildcat Den, which I just went and visited in the fall time. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then across the river in Illinois, you have Loud Thunder Preserve. So you have the options. It's just for the amount of people that are here, for the amount of wilderness land, it seems a little congested, because especially from my point of view, I came from a small town in western Iowa where we had tons of public land to hunt and fish on and not a lot of people. Whereas here, we have a lot of people, but not a lot of public land. So just something to think about. But what about Des Moines, the biggest city in Iowa? What do they possibly have? Well, they kind of have the same issues, but they do have a ton of parks. They have places right outside the city, like Saylorville Lake. They have Ledges State Park, which is north kind of by Boone, Iowa, which is absolutely gorgeous. When you go down into this valley, you don't feel like you're in Iowa anymore. You have sheer cliffs, you have a creek running through. It's really, really amazing. I went there all the time when I was in college. So it's just a great area, but that's all within Des Moines area as far as getting out and being into wilderness. So there is options when you're moving to each one of these cities. It's just pick and choose which ones you think are going to be important to you and go out and find them, because they are around. Now, another huge factor when moving to any one of these cities is deciding on if you want to be close to other major cities. So what does that look like? Well, Des Moines is probably the most isolated compared to the other two, because it's right in the middle of the state. It's the largest, biggest around, and not a whole lot around it. But if you wanted to go to larger cities, you have Omaha, which is about 2 hours away on the west side, and then you have Davenport, which is 2 hours on the east side of it. But as far as that goes, maybe you go up to Minnesota, Minneapolis, which I believe is like 3 hours, 4 hours, or you can go to Kansas City, which is about 3 hours from Des Moines as well. So is it available to get to places? Absolutely. Is it close by? Maybe not. Depends on your definition of close by. But when you're talking about Cedar Rapids and Davenport, I'm going to lump those in together because they're pretty close in proximity. We have Chicago, From Davenport, it's about 2.5 hours, depending on where you're going. And obviously that is one of the biggest cities in the entire world. So if you want to get out of town and go to a real city, that's your option when it comes to Rapid City. Cedar Rapids and Davenport. So no matter where you choose, you're going to have access to some of these major locations, and that's if you even want to get out. Maybe you're going to enjoy the city so much that you never want to leave, but I highly doubt that. I'm sure you'll want to leave at some point. But if you're moving to Iowa and you're not quite decided on which city you want to be in, well, hit me up. My number is down below. I'm the one that answered all those emails, phone calls, and text messages. I have lived all over the state, so I might be able to help you narrow down where you need to be when moving to the state of Iowa.